and welcome to part 4. In this section, we are going to be talking about inclusion, or ways to accommodate to the needs of those who have disabilities. We've moved from the religious aspect to the more medical aspect. The medical aspect is still around to this day, but now we are shifting yet again to a more advocacy aspect. The advocacy aspect starts to arise at this period. As we talked about in the last section, we were looking at the parents' movement, which started to give rise to a lot of advocacy movements for those who have disabilities. In this section, we are going to look at the disability movement starting to gain traction. However, there's still a lot of ghosts or stigmas hanging around. There's paternalism and stigmas haunting the movement. This leads to further isolation and poverty of those who wanted to gain further independence. Also during this time period, there is the rise of the telethon movement. Before the telethon movement, if you wanted to help someone with a disability, you often would send in stamps with postcards, or there were posters and you could write to a certain address and send money. But the telethon movement changed everything. Now with television and radio, and of course there were radio programs where you could send in money and write to them. But with the invention of television, the telethon movement started to gain a little more, gain some traction. One of the most famous people for the telethon movement is the late actor Jerry Lewis. He's most famous for creating a yearly telethon, and his telethons would have people call in and help raise money for what he had, cystic fibrosis. Unfortunately, the telethon movement tends to be problematic. It draws a lot on the Tiny Tim syndrome, or relying on people to donate money for charity and playing with audiences' emotions. It weakens people with disabilities to the status of insignificance. Rather than looking at the person, it looks at the disability first and the person second, that they can't do anything and that the only way they can get ahead or forward is if somebody who is rich or able-bodied can pay for their treatment plan. Philanthropists must walk a fine line between establishing independence for the individual with a disability and causing a person with a disability to feel like a charity case. It's a big problem still to this day, and something a lot of us who are advocates and part of the disability community have to talk about and address every day. There's also the rise of cults like Scientology. They established this idea that a person with a disability is cursed by God. They must not use a medication to cure, and establishes as the fault of parents for the disability. And they leave it up to God to decide whether to heal the loved one or let him or her die. This, unfortunately, leads to neglect and further harms those with a disability. The continued struggle for acceptance of those with a disability only grows. This creates more of a struggle and further propagates the horror genre. Well, there came a lot of laws to change the history and to further address the question. Many of you may know the court case of Brown versus Board of Education, right? Well, most people think Brown versus Board of Education only helped those who were of color. But it did more than desegregate for students of color. It also helped start a desegregation for those with disabilities as well. This started in the early 1950s. By the time of 1973, there came this Rehabilitation Act. This meant there were equal opportunities for individuals with disabilities produced by the federal government to act on their behalf for affirmative action. Individuals with Disabilities Act of 1975 said children with disabilities could be insured services, including early intervention services and educational opportunities. Imagine not being able to do those things. Why? Mainly because you have a disability and you're considered a social ill to your society. And the fact that there's nothing accessible to you. You don't have wheelchair ramps, you don't have teletype machines, there's no push plates, there's no braille, there's nothing available to you because they didn't have the materials available at the time. In 1968, the Urban Architectural Barriers Act was started to make wheelchair accessible public buildings. 1970 had the Urban Mass Transit Act, which required all vehicles to have wheelchair lifts. But there was a problem. The implementation of it for all vehicles, that like taxis and buses, and even airplanes, had to be delayed for 20 years. There was a court case in 1971 called Wyatt versus Stickney. This is those with physical and mental disabilities no longer to be locked away in institutions. This knocked a big hole in institutionalizing those with disabilities. Before then, if you had a disability, Institutionalized Persons Act fought for rights of those put in institutions being abused, violated, or neglected. But there were still major stumbling blocks, like transportation. A person could be denied a ride in a taxi, airplane, or bus due to the nature of a disability. Marriage. In most states, you were banned marriage for those with a disability. Legally not allowed to adopt or be adopted. You could be denied employment to high-paying jobs based on your disability. And accessibility. Buildings, vehicles, and sidewalks were not accommodated for those with disabilities. I'll be posting on my Facebook page a sign that says no wheelchairs beyond this point. I had a friend who said, I don't believe that was possible, but I have a sign that says otherwise. Restaurants, movies, theaters were often going to social events were banned for a number of those people who were considered socially acceptable. By the 1970s, over 60,000 people with disabilities were sterilized, due mostly to the eugenics movement. If you're curious to see where this statistic comes from, you can check it out on the Disability History website, yodisabledproud.org. They have a lot of great information. I'd like to share with you one of the biggest advocates for the 20th century, who was a poet by the name of Neil Marcus. He wrote a poem called Disabled Country. For this next activity, we're going to be working on inclusion. I suggest that if you're in with your groups and others, to go out there and work on inclusion for this activity. If you are attending if you go to work or if you attend a school, I offer that you go for the lunch challenge. This challenge encourages those who are able-bodied to interact with those who sit alone to have a disability. And you get to know that person with a disability. You can sing at lunch with them and talk about things that you like. What are things do you have in common? What do you like? And invite them to an event. Make them feel included. If you're going to invite them to watch a movie together, invite them to bring something that they enjoy, like a snack. Or if you want them to bring a movie, tell them to bring a movie. Let them be a part of it. If for some reason you go somewhere like a group, a nursing home or something, and you want to do something together, you tell them if they are in a group home or a nursing home and they're unable to come out, you tell them to invite them to their room and you do something at their room or in their community room. Or if you know somebody with a disability but they can't get out a lot, you go over to their house and you ask them to provide drinks or something simple like that. Just find something for you to do. If you meet somebody with a disability that's more mobile and, like, say they are in a wheelchair or something, invite them to something. Go out to eat at a restaurant, or you can go do an activity together. I'm challenging you to the lunch challenge or to do some sort of social activity. I'm not asking you to be their best friend. I'm just asking you to do something together. You can do this at your own speed. Find the time that works best for you and get to know them. I will give you a list. I will give you some questions to consider when you are going out to do an activity with this person. For your activity questions, I had the following. How easy or difficult was it for you to ask that person to an activity? Did you feel connected? Do you feel included? And does this person feel like he or she is part of something? And if not, what can you do to make sure that person feels included? Here are some films that your group can watch together at your own convenience. The Theory of Everything, A Smile as Big as the Moon, Parenthood, the TV show Speechless, Radio, or Monk, to name a few. Here are some questions for you to think about. How does it positively or negatively portray a disability? Does this show or film differ from material made in the early 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s, or even 60s? And in what ways is it similar? I hope you will take up my challenge, and that you will be willing to step outside of your social networking bubble and consider having lunch with someone that's different from you. Or in your neighborhood, going to nursing homes or a group home or something. And I hope that you will help that person feel more included. Let me know how this experience went. You can email me at plasmnetic, that's PLASMNETIC @gmail.com, or you can send me a Facebook message on facebook.com/NoOneIsIgnored. It's on my Belonging Place page, and I want to hear how it went. I hope you end up connecting with somebody, or if you're still struggling, then feel free to ask me any questions, and I hope I can answer them in the best way possible. I wish you the best of luck, and I hope that we can chat about belonging next time in part 5. So what do you struggle with in being included? Have you ever felt included in something or not? How did you feel when you were included? How did you feel when you weren't included? Please consider the lunch challenge, and I hope you will take it up and go for it. Until part 5, I hope you will consider what I said in part 4 or in the past 4 parts. And I hope you will join me for part 5, where we will talk about belonging.
525,600 minutes. How do you measure a year? In daylights, in sunsets, in midnights, in cups of coffee, in inches, in miles, and laughter and strife. In 525,600 minutes, how do you measure a year?